Hello, good evening. This is Business Live. Welcome, everyone. Tonight in the news, President Akufo-Addo says he's unfazed by criticisms of his handling of the banking sector crisis. We'll bring you an update of his tour of the central bank today and what officials say they've settled, or officials saying that they've settled all depositors of the 7 banks that went down in the banking crisis. Civil society organizations are kicking against the Agyapa Royalties Deal. Ahead, we will speak with the executive director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy, Ben Boachi, who has joined in the calls for a suspension. Also tonight, a warning of economic recovery from COVID-19 could prolong if government does not check election year risk spending. I'm Israel Lai. The details come up after this break. But President Akufo-Addo says he's unfazed by criticism of his handling of the banking sector crisis, which led to the collapse of 7 indigenous banks. Dozens of rural and microfinance institutions in the country were also affected, resulting in a loss of over 20 billion cedis. He is particularly unhappy. The criticism is coming from persons he says supervise the rot in the system. Governor Dr. Ernest Addison also disclosed all depositors of the 7 collapsed banks have been settled. Elton Brobe was with the president.
President Akufo-Addo has been out and about today, and the first port of call was the central bank, that's the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana is particularly important because this bank, a year and a half ago, collapsed some 7 indigenous banks because according to the Bank of Ghana, they were found to be insolvent. Now, President Akufo-Addo at a meeting with the leadership of the central bank had 2 questions. One, what the Bank of Ghana is doing to ensure that there is not a repeat of the crisis in the banking sector that led to the collapse of the 7 indigenous banks. And secondly, the status of payment to depositors of the banks that went under. Now, President Akufo-Addo was particularly excited about the fact that the central bank and the finance ministry have been working together. And the reason, according to him, is a revitalization of the Ghanaian economy after the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
It's going to be difficult to write the history of your governorship without talking about the banking sector issues. The success of the reforms will define a lot your period here as governor. Government has found it necessary to give the bank maximum support because it became obvious to us on coming into office that if the analysis that had been made about the fragility of the financial sector that we had inherited, if we were not prepared to back up that analysis concretely, God knows what would have happened to our country. And the manner in which the reforms have been carried out, I know there's a lot of controversy. There are many of the people who are responsible for the crisis in the first place have found it convenient to be able to point accusing fingers at those of us who have tried to clean up the mess. But that is the way of things.
In responding to the questions put before him by the president, one relating to what the central bank is doing to ensure that there is not a repeat of the crisis and the status of the payment, Dr. Ernest Addison, who is a governor of the Bank of Ghana, said that the bank has rolled out 3 issues to ensure there is some sanity within the banking sector. And first is a corporate governance directive, as well as the data misreporting, which, according to him, was an issue when he took over as governor of the central bank. And thirdly is the capital verification. When banks says that they have this amount of money in their deposit, they should be able to back that with the evidence. And according to him, they are ensuring that with these directives, the country will not slip back into the crisis that led to the collapse of the 7 indigenous banks.
The second one also has to do with misreporting of data. There was a lot of falsification of data by the financial institutions to the central bank. So we have brought in new technology which would allow us to get the data directly from the sources, so that no intervening human interventions would be in there to distort the data that the central bank receives. third one has to do with the capital verification process, because a lot of the banks reported that they had capital when in fact they didn't have any capital at all. So we have reviewed the entire, capital verification process of the bank, and it's almost impossible now for us to have a bank that doesn't have any capital and yet is allowed to operate. And we think that, of course, in addition to that, we have the capacity building for the staff of the banking supervision department. We've had a lot of training programs with the IMF.
But more importantly, he announced that the central bank has so far paid 100% of depositors of the 7 banks that went under, and 95% of monies owed depositors with some of the rural banks that also went under. Regarding the issues with the GN Bank owned by Dr. Indum, the governor of the central bank indicated that they had issues with some of the facts that they presented, but they've resolved those issues, and hopefully this week and next week will start payment of depositors that had money with the GN Bank. From the Jubilee House, Elton Brobe reporting for Joy News.
President Akufo-Addo's next stop was the Ghana Stock Exchange, where he pledged government support for the exchange to become a key player in West Africa. Ebenezer Sabote has that part of the story.
According to President Akufo-Addo, the operation of the stock exchange is critical towards building a stronger economy. The visit was aimed at assessing the impact of the coronavirus on trading activities and ways that government can provide support. He also used the occasion to encourage managers of the bourse to work towards achieving its aim of being the regional trading hub for the West African sub-region.
Gone through some very harrowing times, not just us here in Ghana, but the entire world. And it has had a major impact on the economies of virtually all the nations of the world. So if indeed a stock exchange is one of the critical instruments for growing a country's economy and thereby growing the possibility of the people becoming more and more prosperous, I think it is important that those of us who have to make decisions affecting the economy have a clear idea of what is going on here. And that's the main reason why I came, to find out the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on your activities, where you are in terms of growing the exchange, and what obviously government on its part can do to assist the process of getting Ghana a really strong stock exchange.
Meanwhile, the president has also promised to build an ultra-modern office facility for the exchange if he retains power in the next election.
And to let you know that in me you have a friend, and in my government you have a friend. The finance minister has committed himself on the new building. So, and he is one of the founders of this place. I've been able to bring him back here. He hasn't been here for about 2 or 3 years. So today I've been able to bring him back. And he's leaving you with the promise that if the 4 more years for Nana materializes, he's going to take the lead in making sure you get new and fitting premises. So this is the So once again, thank you very much indeed.
Managing Director of the Ghana Stock Exchange, Eko Afeji, in appreciating the president, described his visit as historic and believes the country will benefit from many initiatives undertaken by the capital market.
Now, the country could risk prolonging its economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic if checks are not put in place to halt overspending on election-related programs. This is a warning from economist and head of financial advisory at Deloitte, Yalate. According to him, though the government can spend within the projected fiscal deficit target of 11.4% of GDP this year, any more overspending will push the economy into difficult times.
All the 26 countries in the EU have all suspended the cap. We also know countries like Jamaica and other countries also that have a fiscal responsibility cap have suspended it. And it's just within what others are doing, or on the light of that, that government has also decided to suspend it. And we have a novel situation in which case government has every right to suspend it. I think we are also still within the global deficit threshold of 13.9%. Currently, we are projecting 11.4%, which is still below the global average of deficit of 13.9%. I think the only caution we have there is that governments to still have some form of self-check and ensure that we still keep to at least the 11.4%. We should not go beyond the global average of 13.9%, because this is an election year, we stand a risk of going beyond that. And the danger with that is that it will lengthen the recovery process after COVID-19, because COVID-19 has put us in a hole. And so if you overspend, we are going to increase the period of recovery from the pandemic.
Do you think we failed the litmus test? Because like you did say, we're an election year, and like this is the time we need to prove to people, we need to prove to the international community that we'll be able to spend within our targets. Do you think we failed the litmus test?
I think that in the absence of the pandemic, we would have really put the right question to government and say that, look, this is an election year. You were supposed to keep to your promise of a deficit of less than 5%, and it was projected around about 4.7%. And so that was still below the cap. But now we are projecting 11.4%. Given the situation that we find ourselves, we have had to overspend, particularly to fight the COVID and also to support companies that are suffering or that have had the adverse consequences of the pandemic on their businesses.
Now, the total amount of foreign currencies kept with commercial banks witnessed some significant growth to hit over $4 billion at the end of May. That's according to a Bank of Ghana report covering development in the economy and banking sector. George Raffi has more.
The amount of the total deposits with commercial banks in several currencies, like pounds and the euros. However, for purpose of easy understanding and analysis, we'll work out everything in dollars. A careful look at the data from May last year to May 2020 showed that foreign currency went up significantly. However, it is not clear for now what might be the reason for this huge growth, whether challenges to the Ghana cedi might have contributed to this, or more people were just turning to foreign currency deposits just to protect their investments from inflation. Others are also worried about this practice where some people and businesses go out there, close their cedi accounts, look for dollars to buy, and open these foreign currency accounts. Some have also argued that this practice often deprives businesses of that needed dollar cash to facilitate their imports. This practice often contributes to some pressure on the Ghana cedi, a development that leads to the perennial depreciation of the local currency the last quarter of each year and the first quarter of the new year. Some of these firms and individuals that operate these accounts have told Joy Business that they are forced to do this because of the fact that most firms out there are quoting their services and transactions in dollars. While the Bank of Ghana may still have some work to do in terms of enforcing its laws that seeks to bar the quotation of prices of some goods and services in the country in dollars.
The civil society group on oil and gas is pushing for the suspension of the Agyapa Royalties Deal because of what it says is a lack of transparency. The group, which is made up of 15 civil society organizations under the banner Alliance for CSOs, say the current structure of the deal will rather hurt the economy. Campaign coordinator for ICEDEC, Steve Mantia, addressed a news conference in Accra.
The opaque manner in which the Act is being implemented, the relatively weak transparency and public oversight arrangements, and the haste with which the government is running to the market, in spite of concerns being raised by a broad spectrum of the Ghanaian populace, do not engender public trust and consensus building around matters of public policy as important as this one. This approach rather raises moral and governance questions. The assumption that once everything goes through Parliament, it is above board and represents the interests of all Ghanaians is deceptive and turns democracy on its head. It makes the elected the only relevant stakeholders in policymaking. And as former US President Barack Obama once noted, it wrongly assumes that democracy is a transaction to be executed between leaders and the people only at elections. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghanaians will probably not have lost sleep over this Agyapa mineral income investment transaction if it had been orchestrated under an open and transparent regime such as the Petroleum Revenue Management Act provides. Indeed, what the government is intending to do with our mineral royalties would not have been permissible under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. For instance, Section 5 of the Act prohibits the use of petroleum holding fund, which includes royalties, as collateral for borrowing. And this is what exactly we are trying to do with our mineral royalty. It also prohibits borrowing against the country's petroleum reserves, which sadly is what the Minerals Income Investment Fund seeks to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to engage, as always, to learn, debate, and challenge government on ways to optimize the mineral royalties if government is willing to activate those democratic channels. Those who have divergent views are equal stakeholders in the mineral revenue. Therefore, attempts to disregard dissenting views is most unfortunate, as they defy the principle of participatory decision-making, which forms the bedrock of democratic practice. We take this opportunity to call on His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to, 1, acknowledge that though the Minerals Income Investment Fund and its special purpose vehicle may be legal without public input, it fundamentally goes against his pact with the Ghanaian people, particularly the mining communities, to cede 20% of mineral royalties to develop the communities.
Former Finance Minister and tax expert Seth Tekper has also been speaking on the controversial Agyapa Deal on Joy FM Super Morning Show. He says the cost to the nation compared to paying tax is higher.
That from the, again, information that is coming out, which government is here to validate or to confirm, but which appears to be authentic because of the silence. When it comes to the fund managers, Ghana's ownership is 51%. It's not 100% as we are being, told in the case of the domiciled, companies. 49%.
How do you come by that information?
I say that is the information that is out.
Yeah, but government has come out to say that is not the case. They say
the fund managers.
I mean, yes.
No, we're not talking. We're talking about the Minerals Development Fund. We're talking about MIF itself, which are 100% government owned. That's what government has clarified. I'm not aware that they have come to clarify that the fund managers,
as in Agyapa.
No, the fund managers,
okay,
who are going to support, Agyapa in the transactions,
okay,
have a 49% interest. I think it's important again.
They have 49% interest in Agyapa. Is that what you're saying?
No, in any transaction that is done.
Right.
That's what fund managers do. So the point is that government has 51, so the beneficial owners for that 49. As I said, this is documents that are out, and I'm just flagging it as important, therefore, to come to Parliament, with this information so that I can put, these things to rest. So these are, other wrinkles, to this whole transaction.
So, in effect, what you want is more information concerning the whole agreement.
It is a law.
It's not as if
under our constitution.
So it is not as if government is engaged in wrongdoing, but what you want is more information.
Law. Remember our previous argument? I'm saying that is a law. That is not like the tax evasion avoidance, where evasion is the law. I mean, it is a law that you disclose on Article 1815, all information relating to the transaction.
Exactly.
And I say that's what we do with our bonds. And remember that we floated our first bonds.
Now, joining me for more on this is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy, Ben Boakye. Thank you very much, Mr. Boakye, for making time to speak with us. Now, a lot has been said about this deal, quite controversial. But my question is there any good at all in this deal?
Thanks, Israel. I think that's the struggle of everybody to really understand what is really good about it. It raises a lot of questions. And it's essentially what government is trying to do is to cede up to 49% of the royalties of the major concessions of this country to the private sector or to the stock market. So once that is ceded, we should understand that we have hived, 49% or so of our resources to them. And we don't, as of now, know how much the market is offering that share. And source that is much, much stable than many other revenue sources. If you look at the trend in the international market today, crude oil has collapsed, but gold has gained about 30% addition in value over the period. So if you are sacrificing over $200 million cash flow for a stake on the market, you have to tell the Ghanaian people how much you're going to generate, how you're going to use what you are generating. What investment is Agyapa going to do? In fact, who are the people who are managing Agyapa? And those questions have to be provided for us to be sure that this is a vehicle that is actually going to benefit Ghana and not some people. Again, the reason why we have royalty is to ensure that at least, at the minimum, the country can get some revenue from the exploitation of its resources. If you sacrifice that and you subject that to investment, which also introduces risk to that revenue, then you are eroding the actual essence of having royalty in the fiscal regime of the mines. So there are a lot of questions that ought to be answered for us to be sure that there are actual benefits in this. I mean, you may raise $200-300 million now, but would that compare to the benefit that would accrue to the country if we did not take this step? Because like I mentioned, you have a revenue stream of about $200 million per annum. Why would you sacrifice that for anything below $1 billion? So these are the conversations and the questions that we are asking at this point to be clear
Mr. Boakye,
what decision government is taking.
So what we've heard from the CSOs is that this deal should be suspended entirely. Now, do you want to just suspend it and scrapped entirely, or would you want some amendments to be made, or if your questions were answered, will that convince you?
I think the essential part is that we have to stop and rethink the whole conversation to see how can we better utilize our mineral resources, our mineral royalty. Are there options that are better than listing it on the stock exchange? And those things will come out when there is a broader consultation and conversation around the utilization of the revenue. And we don't think that has happened yet. And through that consultation and open and transparent engagement, we will decide as a country where we want to go with our mineral resources.
Now, Parliament has approved the deal. That's parliamentary approval, don't mean anything.
I think consistently, Parliament has shown that they are not open to engagement. They don't want to engage on some of these critical conversations that should be broad. If you are signing off 49% of the royalties of a country and you didn't see it fit to engage relevant stakeholders, then you actually renege on your duty. And I think essentially that's what Parliament did. And that is why Parliament itself today is fighting, because they didn't thoroughly look at the agreement to see that there could be challenges with the agreement, where we are now even saying that Agyapa can hide in a tax haven, operate in Ghana, and will not pay tax to the Ghanaian government. I mean, how did that skip the eyes of parliamentarians? And these are the questions and demands that we have to place at the doorstep of our parliament, for them to up their game and engage the public to deepen democracy and not pretend or assume that whatever decision they take is sacrosanct and does not require engagement with the public.
All right, thank you very much, Ben Boakye. Ben Boakye is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. And that'll be it for Business Live. My name is Israel. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good evening.